As I understand it, it's my session that stands between us and lunch, so I will try to keep it to the time that we have allotted for today, but thank you so much for coming and listening to me talk. My name is Annie Scranton, and I run Pace Public Relations. I'll tell you a little bit more about my firm and what we do later on in the presentation, but you are here today to hear me talk about perfecting your pitch and why personal branding matters, especially for women. There are some gentlemen in the audience, and so really all of this can be applied to men or women, but I think we all are in agreement that being a woman in the tech space has a certain set of challenges, or maybe in most workplace settings. So that is what we'll be talking about today. So why do you need personal branding? When people think about branding, a lot of the times they're thinking about it either for their startup or for their company, but you may not think about it for yourself. Personal branding is so important whether you have your own startup, your own company, whether you're a member of a team already at a larger corporation, or if you're freelancing or sort of pivoting in the next stage of your career. The reason for that is because your personal brand is your calling card. It's the thing that's gonna set you apart from everyone else in your space, in your competition. So I like to always think of personal branding, very simply put, is in 30 seconds, how are you gonna describe who you are and what you do and why that person you're talking to should actually care about it? So you wanna really think about what's gonna make you stand out amongst others and what's the return on investment. So for me, in my firm, we specialize a lot on getting our clients featured on television, different TV bookings. So when someone asks me, what do you do? I say, well, I can get you on TV. And that's usually short enough and intriguing enough to sort of pique the interest of someone that I'm talking to. So you really want to think about what's that one unique quality that sort of sets you out amongst everyone else. I sort of already talked about this, but you will be overlooked if you're at a larger corporation. If, say, there's 10 colleagues of yours who are in the same division, it's so important to figure out, well, okay, I know that this person's good at this, I know that this person's good at this, but what is it that I'm good at? What is it the thing that's gonna make me indispensable to the company, or that maybe can actually help you to pivot to the next stage of your career? Today there's more competition than ever before. On average, every one corporate job opening attracts 250 resumes, and only about 5 get called in for an interview. So that kind of just gives you a sense of how stiff the competition is. And women are likely 15% less likely to get promoted. So we need to work even a little bit harder than the men to make ourselves stand out. It's tough out there. There's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of startups, there's a lot of innovation happening, but in your field, you can probably name several competitors or companies that do kind of similar things to you. So you really want to think about that when you're thinking about your personal branding, that there's a lot of competition out there. And so, IT manager, I was doing some research before this presentation, saying it's the second hardest job to land that pays more than 100K. The 12th hardest job to land in tech is technology manager. So now is really the time to figure that out. Something, though, that I think you need to think about even before you get to the personal branding aspect is to figure out how to protect your own personal brand and your reputation. We've all sort of seen how volatile the media is these days, and how one rogue tweet or one something you did 20 years ago can kind of come back to maybe harm you in your career. And there's really no such thing as being untouchable or unfallable from grace anymore. So every single one of us who's here today has a reputation to maintain, and that is, so important. Because if you don't take charge of your own brand, someone else will. So Before I go into a little more, I'll tell you about who I am, and then I forgot to mention in the very beginning, if there's any questions as I'm going along, please feel free to raise your hand and ask, and we could kind of make this a little bit more two-way street here. But my career is, I started out in TV news, and I worked for national TV for 8 years. I was what's known as a booker at TV networks. I worked at Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, CNBC. I worked for Good Morning America on the Today Show. I was what's known as a booker on those networks. So I was responsible for figuring out what were the interesting segments that we would talk about that evening, and then more specifically, figuring out which guests I would come on as the person for my anchor to interview and to discuss that subject. So it really opened me up to meeting a ton of different people, learning about a lot of different things, and really building my network. I was lucky enough to have some on-camera experience, just a little bit, as you could see in those photos, and I worked with some of the biggest anchors out there: Diane Sawyer, Donnie Deutsch, Dan Abrams, just to name a few. So why, as a former TV news producer talking to you about personal branding, there's really two reasons. The first is my own professional journey. So I didn't realize it, but at the time when I was in TV news, I bounced around from network to network to network. But in the course of doing so, I was building my own personal brand and my own reputation, which was knowing a lot of people, being able to connect people, and with one very, very important secret sauce, which was I really knew the tricks of the trade of how to get on TV, what was gonna work to get somebody to be considered for an interview. This sort of lifestyle really suited me. I'm sociable, I'm outgoing, I like to meet people, and that was one of the really cool benefits of my job, was that when you work in the media, even though you don't get paid well at all, you get invited to a lot of really cool events and industry types of things, and it just was, I used it really as a way to network and to meet a lot of different people. So after working at about a half a dozen shows or so, I was working at CNBC when I was 29, and I got laid off. The show I was working on, Donnie Deutsch's show, got canceled. I did what any young woman would do at that time. I called my mom crying, and then after I recuperated, I sent out an email to everyone in my network saying, I lost my job, I need something, I have to pay my rent, do you know of any TV openings? And a publicist who I had worked with a lot, booking his clients on our show, emailed me and said, I have kind of a unique idea. I know you've never done this before, but would you consider helping me book my client, who I think he was like a trader or something like that. He had a new book about the market out. Would you be interested in helping me get him booked on any CNBC show? And if you're successful, I'll pay you $500. So I was like, okay, I'll try it. So I emailed my friend in the newsroom and said, well, what do you think about this guy? And she said, yeah, great. Can you come on tomorrow? And, so like that, I not only made money, which was cool, but I was able to see the potential basically in sort of how I could pivot and how I had something that was unique that likely not that many other people had that were looking to sort of get into this new career of public relations. So from that moment on, that's when sort of the idea came to me to open my own firm and do PR. It is something I had never thought about before. I have never taken a business class before. I had no idea even had the formalities of public relations. But I kind of just said, I'm gonna run with this and see where it goes. I was also very fortunate because I got hired full-time at another network like about a week later. So, my story is really also about how I turned my side hustle, so to speak, into my business. That was back in 2010, and it was just me for a few years, and now we're a staff of 12, and we have offices in New York and DC, and we have over 40 clients. Pace Public Relations is the name of the firm, and as I said before, we do specialize in getting clients on TV. We have a wide-ranging sort of client base, a lot of political experts or financial or tech experts who can kind of weigh in on the big stories of the day, but we work with all different types of startups and different businesses, ranging from corporate to lifestyle. The main aspect is those clients want to get their brand featured in the media, and they want to get that media attention. So we're sort of the conduit of how to do that. So this leads into the second reason why I'm talking to you today, because this is really my daily job, is to get our clients featured in the media. But before we can even do that with our clients, we need to understand what the client's goals are and what they want to achieve. And this kind of dovetails into personal branding, because if you don't know what your end goal is, how can you properly brand yourself? You need to sort of understand what you stand for, what you want to achieve, what your expectations are, and then from there you can kind of turn it into that perfect pitch that is going to grab the attention of the media. I also represent a lot of females, which is something that we can talk a little bit out later. So, how do you figure out your personal brand? Goals. This is like the number one thing with, I think, any line of business. If you don't, there's this famous quote that says, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. And so you really need to figure out, what do you want your path to be? I think it's super important to stay open at the same time, because life can throw us curveballs of all times. But you really need to think about, personally and professionally, what do you want to achieve in your life? How is it going to work, career and personal, kind of melding together? Some other things to really consider when you're building your personal brand is, it sounds so basic, but always being honest. There's definitely sort of, the comparison of the fake it till you make it mentality, but you always want to be crystal clear with a client, with a customer, and with yourself about what you want. Not everybody is suited out to start their own business. Not everybody is suited out to work at a large corporation or a startup. So I think basically to be honest and to be realistic in your expectations. Maybe some of you will walk out of the room today and be like, I know what my personal brand is, but you're likely gonna have to put some time into it and really give it some thought, as you should. Something that is so important, I think, is being consistent across all areas. Once you have figured this out, or even possibly a step before, social media, what is online about you there? Before I hire anybody, I'm going on their Facebook, their Twitter, I'm Google searching them, and that's why I said before, every single one of us does have a reputation and does have a brand, and if you don't know what's out there about yourself, that's not a good thing. You should absolutely know what turns up in page 10 of the Google search, because employers and prospective clients, they can go deep. So you need to also just know your key strengths and play to them, and I think that's something that only you would be able to answer as you go along. Part of it also just sort of entails being the best version of yourself that you want to be. By trying to emulate that and aspiring towards it, that's really going to be the first step to you figuring out, well, do I like this path, or am I maybe better suited for another path out there? I think also just highlighting your strengths in everything you do. Your resume, I think, is really showing what you do, but your personal brand is showing how you do it. So my resume would say, okay, books clients on TV. How you show it is, I would say, I leverage my personal connections, which no one else has, and this is how I'm able to get them the media that they want. There are some sort of types of personal branding. These are some generic ones, but are you a shark? Are you fearless and unafraid? That's a real asset, I think, in a number 2 position, certainly for different startups. Are you a multitasker? Are you that person that's saying, give me multiple assignments, I'm gonna be able to get them all done expertly? are you an organizer? Something I'm not particularly good at. Are you going to be able to manage all the spreadsheets, all the account work, all the internal company goings on? That has a lot of value. Are you this get shit done type of person? You know, the person that, I have a few of them in my office when I say, I need this done in an hour, and I know that they're going to be able to do it. Just as some generic ones, but something for you all to think about. Does anyone have any questions so far before I sort of pivot into the next stage? If you do, just raise your hand and I'll call on you as I go.
How do you treat those get shit done people differently in your office? Are they rewarded differently, or they're handling the hardest thing or the most important things? Are they managed differently?
So I am going to disagree that they're more important than other people in the office because I think that there's this perception, right, that like the hierarchy is maybe those people are more important than others, but I personally try to, in my office, let everybody know that from the ground up, it's all helping and it's all going, and I think there's two aspects. The first is that everybody should, in my opinion, treat whatever job they have with the utmost importance because everybody is sort of a cog in the wheel of making it work. The get shit done type of people, I don't know that I necessarily, I mean, I reward them by saying thank you, of course, but it's just that I think that their skill set, they're that type of person, you know, but someone else in my office has a different skill set that's helping me with something that maybe is equally as important because in my line of work, we have to do a lot of reporting. We have to see what the competition is. We have to do a lot of research. So, you know, that's just my personal sort of take on it. And in particular, it's what you said is something I was just talking about with my colleagues. I think that a lot of the younger employees that we have in our office sort of have that point of view that, oh, wait, like, you know, the people who are given these tasks of getting the bookings, of getting the interviews, that's the work that I want to be doing, and they view that as the most important. And it's been a challenge sometimes to let them know that, no, actually, the stuff that you guys are doing is equally important because without that work, we can't do our job up at the top. So hopefully that makes sense. Does anyone have another question before I go on? Okay, so why does a personal brand matter to women? So, you know, a lot of this we all know, but women have to work harder than men to succeed. We trail men in salary. So according to a recent article, women only make 80.5% of their male counterparts. So that kind of stinks. As we've recently seen in the news, there's a lot out there about, you know, men mistreating women, and, you know, some of it is really makes me angry, and some of it maybe, you know, is generational, but there is some of that still going on, and we just have to work a little harder, and I think that if you stick to your core values, this is what's going to set you apart. A few women here with strong personal brands who I really admire is Eleanor Roosevelt. She's somebody who really transformed the office of the First Lady, which is amazing. She used it to further her own personal brand, which was social activism, and she wrote a daily newspaper column, which is pretty remarkable. Another one of my favorite quotes, do what you feel in your heart to be right, for you will be criticized anyway. You'll be damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I couldn't believe that. I couldn't agree with that more. Some other women with strong personal brands, Monique Talon, her personal brand is Leading Gracefully. We all know Sheryl Sandberg, her personal brand is Leading In. Arianna Huffington, hers is Leading Back, and we all know the great work that she's doing at the Huffington Post and with Thrive Global. So a little bit just about sort of maintaining your brand. It's really important, I think, to make it part of your daily routine. How I practice this every day is I literally have a Google Doc that's always open on the tab on my computer, and it has like my to-do list, and it's the same like 5 things every single day. So write a LinkedIn post, make sure I'm tweeting all my clients, make sure that I read relevant industry news for myself so I know what I should be up on and what news I should be doing, or reacting to, I should say. Reading the general news, that's important because we have a wide-ranging client list and I need to know the news that's going on with them. And also, I'm a connector, I'm a publicist, and so every single day I try to identify one new person that I'm gonna try to make a meaningful connection with, which entails, in my opinion, looking them up online, it's usually a journalist, seeing what kind of stories they're writing, checking them out on their Instagram or Twitter. It's kind of weird, but there's not that much privacy left anymore, and if you wanna really get to somebody, you can more or less find, I think, a good way in, so to speak, just by spending about 20 minutes doing a good Google search. Something else is, you really only have one shot at a first impression, and I cannot stress this enough. We're hiring at my firm, and we recently had an interaction with somebody who expressed interest in the position, and his email to us was there was typos, there was some, and then he said, oh wait, actually I can't meet on Wednesday, can you meet on Friday instead? And it's just kind of like, while I certainly understand people being busy and things like that, it's probably not somebody that we would be interested in hiring if they can, in their first outreach to me, sort of spell check and use correct grammar and kind of know their schedule ahead of time. Something that I think also each and every one of you can do is to create your own personal website. This may sound like an idea that maybe doesn't make sense for you, given wherever you are currently working at the time, but I actually think it's a great idea. In my own hiring and just when looking up other people online, it doesn't have to be this really crazy in-depth website, but if you have your own website and it says, here's who I am, here's what I do, here's what I'm good at, and here are the places where I've worked before, for me, sometimes, I think that's even easier than opening a resume and kind of going through it. I mean, I think you sort of need both, but I think it just also shows that you understand the importance of a personal brand and the importance of putting yourself out there in a way that's going to be easy and accessible for prospective clients or employers. And then just routinely updating all of your social media handles with content that's relevant and with a strong point of view. So, I have a question actually for the audience. Did people Google me before they came in here today? Did I? Okay, only a few. Okay, so I think though that I was thinking maybe more people would have, but I think it's just something though, as I said before, it's so easy to Google somebody, and so you just need to make sure that in that Google search, you're 100% comfortable with what's out there and what's online about you. There's no, random photos from 10 years ago from your college partying days, or it's kind of amazing what you can find online. But you need to constantly sort of be out there and building your own brand. The way that I think that I can talk about maintaining your brand is once you get your website up, is to start a blog and to start putting content out. Everyone now is talking about content creation. That can start on your own side as well. Blogs today can be 250 words. It doesn't take that long to actually put something together if you can really try to be focused. But it's a way that if you ever do get to a point where you can hire an SEO firm to kind of boost some of those, it's another really nice way for people to find you. And certainly I think for them to see, oh wow, this person who works in this sector of tech has given some thought to a current story and how it applies to the work that they're doing. I believe that shows that you are taking care and stock in not just your career or your corporation, but sort of in the industry at large, which when we think about building thought leaders and think about assisting clients with that, that's an important aspect to it, and you could start practicing that on your own end. a little bit about just sort of if you are at the stage where you're ready to kind of get your pitch out to the media for yourself or for your client, it's really important to develop relationships with journalists. I obviously had sort of this direct conduit into it since I had worked at so many of the different networks. But there are ways that you can do it. One way that I would easily suggest is think about 5 to 10 publications, websites, TV programs, podcasts that you really love and that you would love to see yourself featured in. Then you have to ask yourself, is this a realistic goal? And what I mean by that is any of it eventually can be a realistic goal. But if your favorite podcast is How I Built This, and you listen to that and you know that Guy Raz only interviews super, super top CEOs, maybe that's not, a realistic goal right now. But if you listen to it, you'll see that at the end, they do a little 5-minute interview with a burgeoning, up-and-coming CEO. Maybe that's your ticket in. So I think doing the research ahead of time is extremely important. Once you've identified the correct outlets, you need to identify the right journalists within that publication. And the way that you do that is by actually reading the newspaper, reading the website, getting yourself familiar with the content. That this is something that we do, obviously, for people who don't have the time or the bandwidth, but it's not that hard to do yourself. You just have to make it part of your daily routine to see what they're covering. Then my next recommendation would be to figure out a way to very relevantly start to develop a relationship with that journalist online via their social media. One thing that I like to do and advice that I could give is journalists really like to be flattered, and they really like to be praised for writing a great story or having a unique point of view. As I mentioned before, they're not getting paid a lot, and it's tough out there right now to work in the journalism field. So by following them on Twitter, reading a story and just saying, hey, I really like that story. This was my favorite part, with one sentence. No ask, no would you like to cover my company now? Just develop that and sort of try to engage in a relevant and meaningful way, maybe with some of the other commentators. That actually works, and it seriously can help to develop that relationship. LinkedIn, you can see what sort of mutual connections you may have or people you may have in common. There is absolutely nothing like a warm introduction, which I'm sure all of us can agree on with many aspects of business. So being able to identify, okay, this reporter knows my childhood friend from growing up. Hey, childhood friend, are you still in touch with this reporter? Well, yes, I am. We talk all the time. Great. Would it be okay if I used your name in an email? Sure. And then you could say, childhood friend, suggested I reach out. That subject line is probably going to have like a 99% higher chance of getting read than if you just said info about my startup or whatever that you would put in the subject line. As a producer, I literally got hundreds of pitches every single day into my inbox. Hundreds every single day. And so the only thing that would make me read them versus automatically deleting them is if there was a subject line that stood out to me, or if I recognized the name of the person who was coming in. It's really as simple as that. The last bit is to wait for the right story. Wait for your right story. All of us want our company, our startup, ourselves featured in the media immediately, and that makes sense, especially if you're hiring a PR firm who you're paying to get you into the media. But if there's not a real direct connection to a topical story, wait for the right story. What I mean by that is you don't have to just pitch yourself on the merits of your company or your startup or what you're doing. You can pitch yourself as a thought leader or an expert on current trends happening in your space. So that's really what I mean by that is wait till there is a very, very relevant, tangential, big news story going on that you can sort of hook yourself into as a talking head or as an expert. that is my presentation, and I'd love to take any questions from you that you might have right now. Okay, so the question was there any book suggestions? Yes, of course, right now, every single one of them is blanking on me right now. Like literally, I'm like, oh God, I've only been reading like fiction right now to sort of wind down at night. So, I mean, okay, I read Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. I don't know if anyone else did, but I found that to be extremely helpful in many ways for my business. I also recently read Rachel Hollis's book, Girl Wash Your Face, and that I also found extremely helpful. I should add her to my slides. She's a remarkable case of personal branding, and that book I think really is useful to, particularly for women as well. Yes.
Talks a lot about the professional personal brand. Can you touch on a little bit the interests outside the office, how that helps your personal brand elevate it?
Absolutely. So the question is, what should you be doing outside of your personal or professional brand to sort of help elevate it? And so for me, I work in public relations. I'm a member of several relevant PR organizations like PRSA. I'm a member of the Elevate Network, which is for women at a higher stage in their career. I'm very active at NYU, where I got my master's in public relations, and I just attended an event on Monday night, actually, that was all about pitching and media work. So the easy answer is that to find the relevant organizations within your specific industry where you will be surrounded by your peers, but also maybe by potential clients or customers or media. That would be my first recommendation. My second would be that in every city there's meetups, there's guest of a guest, there's different websites that you can find events that are happening that are free that you can go to. It requires work. You sort of have to put yourself out there. But if you do that, and you're open, I think some great connections can happen. Lastly, I think any alumni connections that you can leverage are so important. And through my undergrad and my graduate, it has led to clients, it's led to interns, it's led to new hires, it's led to just me thinking outside the box in new ways. So those would be some recommendations. Thank you.
Your side hustle led into your full-time job. If you want to keep them separate and they're in separate fields, how do you maintain one personal brand that might not be for the same audiences?
I mean, that's tough. The first question I would ask is, does your full-time job care that you have a side hustle? Yes, you're not?
No, it's like yoga teacher.
Okay. Because that's the sort of first thing you have to answer is like, could my full-time employer feel like this is not something that they're okay with? If they're totally fine with it, then I would say what you could do is you could have a website that has your name, and then you could have basically two different tabs, consultancy work, yoga work. And then what you can do is you could have like a different URL that sort of, it's like anniescranton.com/yoga, and so it would only direct it right to that and then direct it to the consultancy. Probably an easy way to do it.
You talked about pitching to get presented. How do you pitch when you want to write for a publication?
Okay, so just first off, it is challenging. Because I have writers coming to me and saying, "Do you have connections of people I could write for?" This would be my recommendation. Identify new blogs or websites that are very new. Those newer sites are likely going to be looking for writers and for people to help create content for them. The second would be to identify at the outlets that you would like to write at, you have to identify the correct editor, because that's the person that would be responsible for hiring you to freelance write. So identifying the editor and then using sort of the tactics I kind of talked about earlier, finding, do you have a personal connection? You know, is there a way that you could say, I really enjoyed, you know, reading the recent columns on, you know, in this section, here's my idea for what I think I could contribute to it. So I think by doing a mix of that could help.
How do you leverage off of the media that you already get when you do all these steps? How do you keep it going?
That's a great question, and one that our clients ask all the time. So a couple different things. The first is when you get a link, say you get featured in a newspaper, or you do an interview on TV. The first thing is to make sure that you actually save that clip on your own server separately, because sometimes the links go away and then you're like, oh my God, this huge article I was in is like no longer there. That's the worst, right? So save it first. The second is to share it across all of your social media channels in as strategic or long tail way as you can. Meaning, can you, if it's a TV clip, can you kind of slice it up into little different sound bites and roll out different sound bites? Hey, you know, this was one of my favorite parts from this interview that you could do sort of day after day after day on your social. I think you can also take that clip and write a short blog post about it. You know, that's just another way to kind of boost the SEO and boost it. If you have budget for SEO, that can then make those things jump out instead of maybe just your website or whatever. Clients tell me all the time that people came to them by actually watching a video of them from an interview they did rather than going to their website. So any way that you could boost that in a search. What we do is we always then take that interview or that clip and we use it to pitch other outlets, as long as they're not competing outlets. Like I would never pitch a CNBC clip to Bloomberg TV because those are direct competitors. But if the CNBC clip, you know, our clients had interesting things, and I think I could pitch it to the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times or Fortune or something, I sort of use it as a way to create immediacy to the brand that I'm pitching, because it will sort of make reporters or journalists' ears perk up if they know, oh, they were just talking about this, or, you know. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks. Mm-hmm.
So I have two questions.
Okay.
The first one is, so you talked about how important it was when you're pitching a booker to have a really clever or thought-provoking subject line.
Yes.
What about the actual body?
Okay.
Because I know some journalists, like 5 sentences gets to the point, give me a link to a video, or some want something more standard.
So what I would recommend is, the question is, what do you put in the body of your email? After you've come up with your pithy, catchy subject line, I would keep it extremely brief and sort of get right to the point. I just think everybody sort of has like email inundation and your eyes glaze over when there's like a long email in front of you. So I would keep it to like 5 sentences, super short. And then what I always like to say is, for more information, I've pasted the press release, or I've put more information below. So that way, if they want to keep reading it, it's kind of underneath, but you're sort of presenting it in a really, you know, short way for them to understand quickly. Could this idea work for me? Could it not? I try different tactics. Sometimes I'll do a really short message and then I'll say, you know, are you interested? Would you like me to send more info? Sometimes that works, you know. The thing with journalists is that they're people. And there's no one exact right way to do it, because different people like different things, but those 2 ways have kind of garnered us the most results.
And my follow-up was, what is overly nudging?
What is overly nudging? I mean, yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm really annoying people, but that is my professional job, and I will tell you, there have been times where I am like convinced that I have the right story for this reporter, and I followed up like 5 times, which is really annoying. Sometimes it's a tweet, you know, sometimes I'm DMing them or I'm messaging them on LinkedIn. That's too much, you know. I would say, but sometimes I have to. I would say 2 follow-ups at most is the way to do it. Don't call. No one wants a phone call. What I do is this is something else we just started doing is if you do a short email, right, like save something for the follow-up. So that way you could say, reply back to the original email, making sure you got this. By the way, the info below is especially relevant in light of this news that just happened, or something else that's going on. And then I would say one more follow-up that's probably going to be it. Yes.
So my name's Catherine. I'm from the Women's Business Center at Columbia College, which is a historic women's college. So this whole concept of women's empowerment is really important to us. So I have 2 questions. And it could be a little redundant, could be a little loaded. But first of all, do you think it's more challenging for women to maintain their personal brand? And then the second part of that is, what recommendations would you make specifically for women?
I actually think it's easier for women to maintain their personal brand because I think we are innately, if you're a mom and you're juggling or whatever, it's just once you put your mind to it, I think it's something that you could probably maintain just as easily, if not better. So no. And the second question was,
I guess what strategies would you offer? What suggestions would you make?
I think that for women, the most important thing, at least as a new mom, you may have heard my baby crying a little bit in the back, but it's really just making sure that your personal brand is going to make sense for your personal life, and being okay to pivot when there is that personal new thing that comes up. It's okay if your personal brand changes or evolves. In fact, it probably should. So I think just being aware, the same way we're supposed to kind of meditate every day or take some time for ourselves, just to make that time, I think is most important, because I think as women, we're always trying to move ahead and better ourselves and keep going and what's next. And so just to take stock of it, I think would be my most important advice. We are out of time, but if anyone has any questions, come find me afterwards, and thank you very much.